Welcome to the LRB. I'm Steve Miller, and with me here is Jason Anderson, a legislative analyst. Jason has recently written a publication on counties, towns, and villages. And Jason, tell us a little bit about the kinds of government there are in general.
Thank you, Steve. There's three basic kinds of government in the United States. We've got the federal government that we're all familiar with that handles national policy issues, international treaties, armed forces, and that sort of thing. And all of the duties that are not given to the federal government in the U.S. Constitution are then reserved for the states, according to the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The states' duties are a little more limited, and they're generally more local things, but the state can also delegate some of its duties down to local governments. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay. So what does local government mean in Wisconsin?
Well, there are basically four types of local government in Wisconsin. There are counties, cities, villages, and towns. In Wisconsin, there are 72 counties, 190 cities, 400 villages, and 1,260 towns. Each of these has slightly different ways of doing business, but they all share a very common theme of having a legislative body and an executive to help run the local area. There are basically two broad categories of local government in Wisconsin. There are special purpose districts, like school districts, and then there are general purposes, which are the counties, villages, cities, and towns. We're just going to be discussing counties, villages, cities, and towns, the general purposes here today.
Okay, well tell us a little bit about counties.
County is the oldest form of local government in Wisconsin. Like I said, there are 72 counties in the state, and they cover every square inch. What that means is everyone in Wisconsin lives in a county. They also live in a city or village or a town, but counties cover all of the state. Some people in rural areas receive most of their services from counties. Counties cover basic social services and some cultural services, so that basically means some law enforcement, a lot of road maintenance, and then things like county parks.
Okay, now tell us a little bit about cities and villages.
Cities and villages are generally a little less rural than counties, and they have certain population requirements. So to go from an unincorporated area in a town or a county to become a city or village, a city must have at least 1,000 people. A village must have at least 150. Those requirements are a little higher if they abut urban areas. Cities are also given different distinctions based on class. Milwaukee is currently the only Class 1 city in Wisconsin, and that's a certain population threshold that it's reached. Madison could also be a Class 1 city if it chose, but Class 1 cities have certain duties and expectations about financing for the services that they provide, like police forces and how they pay for things like garbage collection, recycling, fire protection, things like that.
Okay, and then finally, what are towns?
Towns are essentially the absence of a city or village. All areas by law in Wisconsin that aren't contained in a city or village have to be part of a town. Of course, they're also part of counties, as I mentioned earlier, and these townships provide a lot of services that are similar to counties, but they basically share part of the financial burden. So you see a lot of townships that provide some road maintenance being their primary duty, but some cultural things like small parks and things of that nature. And the reason that townships don't provide as many services, of course, is because townships have lower property taxes than cities and villages, which provide more services in a more concentrated area.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the governance of each of these forms of local government.
Well, what all these forms of local government share are an elected legislative body, whether it's a village board in a village, a county board in a county, city councils you'll find in cities, and they also share an executive who is also elected in a lot of cases, which is like a mayor in a city or a village president in the case of a village. But sometimes that executive is appointed by the elected board. So you'll have a village administrator in a village who is appointed by the village board, or a city administrator in a city that's also appointed by the city council.
Okay. So, Jason, what's the bottom line on local government in Wisconsin?
Well, essentially all local governments are organized, like I said, with a legislative body and an executive. And the most important thing about local government in Wisconsin is the fact that most issues that face Wisconsin residents are local in nature. So a lot of those issues need to be resolved locally. Local government is one of the most important parts of government in the state of Wisconsin.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. And if you want to learn more, you can look on the website of LRB to read the Governing Wisconsin. And thank you for watching the podcast.